Hey guys, it's Kristen and Bethany here, and we want to talk with y'all about untold truths about dressing modestly. I think if there's one word that has been totally lost in our society today, it's probably the word modesty.
Oh, yeah.
We just live in a day and age where it's not valued, it's not promoted, it's not encouraged for us as women like it used to be. And
it's just viewed as like this old-fashioned thing back in the day.
Kind of like outdated.
Don't need that.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of times we have a really negative perspective of modesty, and I know I totally had. Like, back in the day, I remember hearing about modesty, and I was like, ew, modesty, gross, you're going to be dressing like a grandma, like you're going to be so old-fashioned. Like, I want nothing to do that. Like, I didn't think that you could combine modesty and fashion.
And
I
you were
think
crying
today,
about it.
Yeah, I was crying because I really did not like it, and I
Yeah.
didn't want to dress that way. For me, I think the reason I had a really negative perspective of modesty is because I didn't really understand why it matters, like why it was
like
important.
the heart behind it.
The heart behind it. I thought it was more about a list of rules, like, okay, a skirt this length or a shirt this loose or whatever
Shorts
it
this
was.
long,
yeah, and so I had this more like rules based, like it's gonna be old fashioned, it's gonna be horrible, like I'm gonna hate it. And I didn't understand why it really mattered. And so I think a lot of us, and the reason that there's a lot of negative connotations that go along with modesty today is that so many of us don't really understand the purpose,
totally.
the meaning, the reason,
Yeah.
the value behind it. And so we want to debunk some of those myths by sharing some truths about why modesty really matters.
One of the things that I think is really important is to stop and ask the question, why do we wear clothes in the first place? Like, there's so many stores selling them, people wear them, but why? And it might sound like a really silly question and you're like, obvious, but when you really think about it and you get back to like the root of why you believe people should wear clothes or why people wear clothes, it's actually kind of confusing because a lot of us don't know why. We just do it. We follow suit, and then whatever's in style and whatever seems to be acceptable, we put that on, but we don't ever stop and think deeper and ask, well, where did clothes come from in the first place? And so we're going to take you a little bit deep here, and we're going to get to some good theological truths and really rewind and go back to Genesis, back to the garden, when the first clothes ever came into existence. Because if we don't start there, we won't understand how we got here. So where do clothes come from? Well, back in the garden, we have Adam and Eve who were living this perfect life. There was no sin, there was no shame. And then next...
And there was no clothes.
There was no clothes either. They
were naked.
They were naked, okay? And so then I'm taking you through a really quick like bullet list here, okay? We'll try to type some of this underneath so you can get the verses at least to go back and look it up. But first we have perfect life, no sin or shame. Then we have the fact that sin entered the world. You know, remember when Eve ate the fruit and handed it to Adam, he ate the fruit, sin entered the world, and all of a sudden there was shame, there was brokenness, their eyes were opened, and they realized that they were naked. There was no longer this perfect existence.
Yeah.
They realized that there was a problem, and they immediately covered themselves with fig leaves. So they now realized, oh no, we are naked, we are exposed, we need to cover ourselves. And so that's when they first tried to cover themselves. Before that, they were never trying to cover themselves because everything was absolutely perfect. So shame entered the world, sin entered the world, and then what happens next is really interesting. Up until this point in existence, there had been no death. There had been no evil, nothing had happened. It was completely perfect. But when sin entered the world, God actually had to kill an animal and use the clothing, the skins from that animal to cover Adam and Eve. A price had to be paid for their sin. And so now Adam and Eve were getting clothing from God through the death of an animal. It's like, it's really interesting and really unique when you think that a price had to be paid for their sin. And God was now covering them and say, you can't cover yourselves.
Their fig leaves weren't enough.
They weren't enough. You need a covering.
Yeah.
And really that takes us to the most important point, which is sin has a price. And it requires a blood sacrifice. And so when you think about clothing and you think about ultimately what Christ did for us, that he ultimately was that sacrifice, and he covers our sin, our shame, our brokenness, really our nakedness, and gives us a way to have true freedom, true life, because we can't, our fig leaves, whatever those might look like, our good deeds, our good works aren't enough. And so when you think of Adam and Eve and how they needed a covering, they needed something else to pay for their sin.
It was a foreshadow.
Yeah, a foreshadowing of Christ coming and dying on the cross. And so as crazy as this sounds, when we wear clothing, it should be a reminder to us of that covering that Christ ultimately gave us through Christ on the cross and the gospel. And so that's ultimately the biggest picture, which is a lot to unpack and a lot to understand. But when you understand that, it really does change the entire reason for why you wear clothing.
When we understand where clothing came from and what it represents, it really changes everything. It's a reminder daily that it's an outward symbol of our inner need for a savior, that we needed covering, we need a savior. And I love the way that Ken Ham puts it. He says, God was illustrating to Adam and Eve that there had to be a payment for their sin. In covering them, he was showing them that there had to be a death and bloodshed to take away their sin. the clothing of Adam and Eve is a picture of the gospel. And I just love that because it really is a picture, like you're saying, of the gospel as we're wearing clothes. It's so much more than fashion. Fashion is fun. It's fun to dress cute, but it's so much more than that. And when we understand that, our clothing can really serve as a reminder daily to ask the question, why am I wearing clothes? That's why I'm wearing clothes. And it's a reminder of the gospel, of Jesus covering us with his death on the cross and how much we need him. Understanding this bigger, really theological perspective of why we even wear clothes, that was really the first step for us. And then the next thing was understanding that it's not just about the hemline. It's not just about, sleeves this long or this long. It's so much more than that. It's about us as Christian women. And this was a huge mindset shift for me, realizing that my body, my life, what I wear, everything about me as a person, as a Christian woman, I should be striving to live for God's glory. That my body isn't really about me. It's about me using my life in a way that glorifies God, that reflects his purity, that desires to honor him in everything I do, including the clothes that I wear. And so when you take the conversation away from how long is the skirt, how short is the sleeve, and you get to the heart, it really changes things, because then you're actually addressing the heart behind it. And that's what God ultimately cares about, is that we as Christian women would have hearts that want to honor God and would want to dress and live in a way that really brings him glory. And I love the way one author puts it. They say, any biblical discussion of modesty begins by addressing the heart, not the hemline. And so in a sense, we do kind of need to get away from this whole checklist mindset and really get to the heart behind it. And for us, that's a huge shift of, how am I dressing?
Yes.
Is it bringing God glory? Is it pursuing holiness? Am I dressing in a way that's pure? I'm really getting to the heart behind it. And then from there, having conversations about, okay, how can I wear clothes that are going to reflect those things that I value in my heart? That's what it's about. And then with that, you can have so much fun. So you can dress modestly, you can be fashionable, you can be cute, you don't have to be frumpy, but it's coming from a heart that's first and foremost saying, how can I glorify God in what I'm wearing?
And I think that's so good, because it's so often I feel like we do the exact opposite. You know, we start first with the rules and then we go, okay, wait, now that I don't like this, which is why we didn't like it at first. But when you start with the heart and then go into the more specifics, it really all makes sense.
One verse that we come back to again and again, and you may not think of this verse as being a modesty verse because it doesn't say modesty, but it's so important. It really gets to the heart, and it does for us, the heart of why we dress modestly. Ephesians 5:1 says, therefore, be imitators of God as beloved children. So we're God's children. We're his beloved children, and he's calling us to be imitators of himself. And when we step back and say, okay, well, who is God? Some of his character qualities are that he's pure, that he's holy, that he's humble. And so in dressing modestly, the goal is not to draw attention to ourselves by the clothes we wear or what we do in anything in life, but it's to be humble, a humble representation of our God in a manner of humility. And that's expressed by what we wear, to say, my life isn't actually about me. It's not about me getting attention. It's not about people looking at me. It's not about people thinking I'm hot. It's about me using my life in a way that glorifies God in humility, in purity, in holiness, because God is so awesome, and we want to use our bodies and our lives to bring him glory and to point to him and not ourselves.
When you think about modesty, you probably weren't necessarily thinking we were going to say that, and that's why we kind of call them untold truths, because it wasn't even until we were a little bit older that we heard some of this stuff, especially about like Adam and Eve and the covering, and then really starting first with the heart and then getting to, okay, how does this practically play out? So we just want to challenge you the next time you go shopping, or even the next time you get dressed in the morning and you're like, hey, let me decide what I'm going to wear today. We want you to take those things, those two specific things into consideration. Say, okay, let me remember the bigger purpose of clothing, and let me reflect on that for a minute. When is the last time I've stopped and really thought about the gospel and how this reflects that? And then ask yourself, where is my heart in this? And how can I make decisions that should reflect a heart as a beloved child of God, and not just with what I want to wear? Thanks so much for watching today's video. If you liked it, give us a thumbs up. And if you want to see more from us, you can subscribe to our channel below, because we post new videos every Wednesday. And if you want to keep up with us more during the week, you can head over to our blog, girldefined.com.
You're like real casual, but I was probably dead.
You're like, hey guys.
Hey guys.
I know, like,
you know.
I know, I hate Showtime.
Yes. Lord, give her humility, please. Okay, go. You're up. Okay. Yes, you are too. Ow, I have broke my neck. No, I don't want to say that. No, I can't remember where I was going now. I didn't really understand. Oh my gosh, I'm done. I'm toast.
No, you've got it.
Okay. I know she did.
I did?
We won't follow suit. You did.
So perfect.
Yeah.
Because you were giving me the, like, from the beginning, you were giving me, like, shut up look, so I thought it was so dumb. So.
Oh, no, I didn't mean to. I was like, great. 200. Help us get to 200 patrons by the end of June. That's our goal, to keep this YouTube channel going and growing and becoming more high quality and producing more content. Would you become a patron, pledging $1 or $2 per video, and help us reach our goal of 200 by the end of June? For more information, click the link below.